This video is supposed to come out a year and a half ago. Basically, we participated in several game jams and plan to release a retrospective video for each one. But due to burnout and the next jam always being around the corner, we kept pushing the writing, recording and editing further and further down the line. We drafted a few scripts but postponed production because it wasn't like the 2 subscribers we had were on the edge of their seats waiting for our next video to drop. The video you're about to see is a compilation of every game jam we took part in since late 2024, featuring only the highlights that we cherry-picked out of the monstrosity of a script we've been writing for the past 18 months. For those of you who aren't familiar with game jams, they are competitions where several teams or individual developers create a game focusing on a single topic or theme. The theme is always revealed on the same day the jam starts and can last as little as a day to about a week. It's a fun way to challenge your creativity, time management skills, and either collaborate or compete with others, as these jams will usually reward prizes to the top rated submissions. Our favorite part is the strict deadlines. It's a real motivator since, in case you couldn't tell from this intro, procrastination tends to get the better of us. The Sleeping Colossus team consists of 2 people, a developer and an artist/musician. We usually stick to our strengths, but during a few of these jams, we switch roles to see what it's like on the other side. Which is a perfect segue for our first game jam, which was GDevelop's 6th Big Game Jam, spanning from the 1st until the 10th of November 2024, and the theme was Fix It. For this and almost every other GDevelop jam, we switch roles to make everything more difficult for us. I'm a big fan of GDevelop, since it's a no-code game engine, which is really convenient for me because I can't code shit. What's unique about this jam compared to the others on the list, it had one extra requirement. The game had to feature online multiplayer. GDevelop has a habit of, whenever they introduce a major feature to the engine, they center a jam around it. They also did this with the introduction of 3D capabilities and their new 3D scene editor. You might be thinking, online multiplayer is no trivial task, even for a proper game, let alone a 10-day side project. Luckily, GDevelop ships a dead simple implementation in the engine. It was released several weeks before the jam began, so I had plenty of time to try it out. I quickly recreated the Test Your Might minigame from Mortal Kombat. Not that one, the original one from 1992. It worked most of the time, so my experiment was a success. When the Fix It theme was announced, we initially wanted to create a co-op game of a team of handymen repairing hazards in a house. But since this felt like a go-to idea for the theme, we changed to pirates instead. But little did we know, someone else had the same idea. First, we made a prototype using nuclear-thrown assets, to test out the core mechanics of the player being able to grab items and use them to interact with specific objects on the map. When that was successful, we just copy-pasted the code with some completely original assets that were not inspired by any other games at all. The ship has 3 floors, connected by ladders you use to seamlessly move between them. On the middle deck, you have all the tools you need to repair the ship. This includes a pile of planks, a box of duct tape, and 3 hammers. There are also a couple of cannonballs scattered around the ship, which I'll talk about in a bit. Every now and then, a part of the ship will need to be attended to, and you'll be notified by these icons on the right. The rate at which things break scales with the amount of players, so more players equals more hazards. There are 5 types of hazards that will require the player's attention: the sails, pillars, oars, planks, and feeding the cannon. The sails, pillars, and oars are fixed with duct tape, which you get an infinite amount from the box. Fixing the planks is a 2-step process. It requires you to first place a plank, which you also have an infinite amount of, and then whack it with one of the 3 hammers. The longer these hazards aren't dealt with, the more damage your ship will take, as depicted by the health bar in the lower left corner. The cannon is unique since it doesn't damage your ship if neglected, but if you don't feed it with a cannonball in time, your ship will sustain a boatload of damage. This gives the impression that you've got yourself into a broadside duel with another ship. 4 hours before the deadline, while under a lot of stress, we composed this little short loop that goes through in the entire game. All of the sound effects are made either in GDevelop or by recording various household objects with a microphone. The biggest issue we had during development was due to my sleep deprivation. We discovered a major bug with the planks during playtesting. If one player places a plank, only that player sees it, making them the only one that can use the hammer on it. This was 1 hour before the deadline and I was absolutely stressed. As I was explaining my woes to the resident code craftsman, he explained to me that I had misunderstood the concept of messaging. Me, as a designer, messaging suggested some kind of chat-related feature. But as it turns out, it refers how various game objects communicate amongst themselves. I still don't get it. Luckily he was right, the plank bug was a synchronization issue. Once we applied the concept of messaging correctly, we managed to fix the game and publish it. The game was submitted 14 minutes and 18 seconds before the deadline. Last minute submissions will become a pattern you'll see throughout this video. This jam had notably less submissions than the previous ones. I'm guessing that the community wasn't too thrilled about the multiplayer constraint and opted to skip this jam, or like us, had some serious technical issues that they couldn't sort out in time. This jam was ranked, meaning for the next 2 weeks all participants will have the chance to play each other's games, leaving ratings based on how fun the games were, how they looked and sounded, and how well they fit the theme. And of course, leave some constructive feedback in the comments section. After 2 weeks of community voting has passed, it was time for the judges to make a decision and announce the winners. The jam had 2 distinct categories, one for the top 10 community rated games and for the top 5 judges' picks. In the community bracket, we came in at 11th place out of 85 entries. In the judges' picks, however, we came in 4th place. Overall, a very fun experience. On to the next one.
Next, we took part in Global Game Jam, spanning from the 20th until the 26th of January 2025. The GDevelop team tipped us off on their community page. Despite being called Global Game Jam, it's not actually one big global event. Rather, it's a collection of many independent jam groups taking part in the same event at roughly the same time. This became apparent during the sign-up process, as we were prompted to pick a site to join. The site in particular was unranked, meaning that there were no ratings nor prizes, just good clean fun. The theme of this jam was bubbles. As usual, we try to pick something unexpected. After discussing several ideas, we settled on bubble wrap. Popping the bubbles is an oddly satisfying sensation that I'm sure we've all experienced. We both spent a lot of time playing Peglin around this period, so we saw this as an opportunity to make our own little spin-off. But instead of pegs, you'd be popping bubbles. I also went on a nostalgic binge over the holidays, playing lots of classic isometric style games. This included titles such as the original Sims, Jagged Alliance, Commandos, and a more recent title, Project Zomboid. So, in addition to the Peglin style bubble popping portion of the game, we'll include an isometric overworld scene to tie it all together. I lost my original design sketches, but here's a crude video I took on my phone. The plot of the game is that you're moving into a new house. All of your furniture is still packed up in cardboard boxes. You move from room to room in the overworld scene. You interact with the cardboard boxes to initiate a gameplay scene where you pop bubble wrap bubbles with the aim of clearing out all of the destructible ones. Once you've popped them all, you go back into the overworld and the room you just cleared is now populated with furniture. I eagerly got to work and managed to produce this scene with Kenny's isometric miniature prototype kit. They're perfect for rapid prototyping in scenarios like this before we have any game-ready sprites. Despite the scene looking pretty functional, I have a confession. It's all fake. You see, instead of moving the character from tile to tile, I simply move him a set amount of pixels depending on if he's moving horizontally or vertically. Collision detection, for example, is also a hack. Instead of using collision shapes, I simply convert the player's world space coordinates into grid coordinates. Then, whenever the player tries to move, I check their prospective destination tile against a handcrafted list of known obstacles. This includes things like walls and furniture. If the destination is occupied by an obstacle, then the move is cancelled. Otherwise, it goes through. The next objective was to design a rough layout for the overworld. And since The Sims 1 was one of the catalysts for this idea, what better way to design the house than build mode while enjoying that cozy soundtrack? It features rooms you typically expect to find in a single family home, such as a living room, a kitchen and dining room, a study, multiple bedrooms, and a bathroom. The graphics were traced over the original Kenny prototype tiles in order to retain the exact measurements. We produced a variety of wall, carpet, and furniture designs. Originally, we exported all the graphics as one giant sprite atlas. However, it turned out that Godot, version 4.4 beta at the time of development, couldn't handle importing very large files. So we broke the atlas down into several smaller sprite sheets. The final product ended up looking something like this. We ended up cutting out the upper floor due to time constraints. With the overworld in place, I started working on the actual gameplay portion of the game. Luckily, this part was straightforward. Godot's built-in 2D physics engine pulled through, which hasn't always been the case in the past. The entire scene consists of the following elements. The launcher. It follows your mouse cursor and propels a ball towards it if there isn't one on screen already. To add a bit of flavor, the launcher and ball take on the appearance of a finger and fingertip, respectively, since that's how you'd pop the bubbles in real life. Poppable bubbles. These pop on contact with your ball. The objective of each gameplay scene is to pop them all as shown by the indicator in the corner. Solid bubbles. You simply bounce off of these. They exist to get in your way or to bounce to hard to reach areas. Bouncy bubbles. Like the solid bubbles, but they add a lot of bounce to your ball. You get a tutorial panel prior to each level, which introduces each aspect of gameplay to you, but since we let you play the levels in any sequence you wish, you might see these out of order. Once you complete one of the levels, you respawn in the overworld and furniture gets revealed in the room you just completed. The newly unpacked furniture's grid coordinates then get added to the list of forbidden coordinates, preventing the player from stepping onto those tiles. The final addition to the game was this menu screen. As you can see, we decided to call this one Unwrapped. The game was submitted 26 minutes before the the original deadline. The group we joined was generous enough to extend the deadline by 6 hours, but we didn't take advantage of this. As mentioned before, our group was unranked. We were just one of 35 entries in a massive pool of over 12,000 worldwide. Good luck ranking all of that. Working on this game was less stressful than the previous one. We had a comfortable amount of time to work with and experiment. In this project, we learned how to work with isometric tile sets, kind of, and had a pleasant experience using Godot's built-in physics engine. For once.
Our next jam was hosted by the legend himself, Brackey. Known for his highly polished Unity and recently Godot tutorials, energetic personality, and questionable humor. Brackey's Game Jam 2025.1 took place between the 16th and 23rd of February 2025, and the theme was Nothing Can Go Wrong. The game is about a kid being forced to get a job by his parents, so he made a fake resume and weasel his way in to get a job as a handyman. The game is split into two parts, an overworld and a series of repair puzzles. In the overworld scene, you explore the house for broken appliances and household disasters, then jump into a dedicated puzzle scene whenever something needed fixing. In the gameplay scene, you control two floating arms independently using separate set of keys. You don't get any clear instructions on what you're supposed to do, because again, you lied that you have experience, so nothing can go wrong, right? The puzzles in the game are fixing the bunny ears on the TV, bleeding the radiator, changing a light bulb, unclogging a toilet, fixing a doghouse, fixing the bathroom and kitchen sink, fixing a record player, and fixing the fuse box. Some of these ideas are from our original brainstorming session for Shipwreck before we switched the idea to Pirates. Finally, for those patient enough, we included a thank you screen when you complete all the puzzles. The two puzzles that were scrapped due to complications and time constraints are fixing the grandfather clock and a pipe in the basement. One of the reasons why we postponed this video so long is because we got lazy and didn't feel like retrospectively recording footage. So to counter that, we tried to screen record the entire development process in real time. At least the art department did. 95% of development work was done in the last 36 hours. Either way, we both ended up pulling an all-nighter. We submitted the game 1 hour and 25 minutes before the deadline. This jam was rated. Unlike the previous one, where we put in a lot of effort in engaging with other submissions, this time we were just too burnt out to care. Unsurprisingly, our overall score was pretty unremarkable, placing in the top 40 to 50% in most categories. We did get top 10% in innovation, which is nice. This next jam needs no introduction. We took part in the next edition of GDevelop's Big Game Jam, specifically the 7th edition, spanning from the 16th until the 25th of May 2025. The theme this time was overpowered, and there were no additional gimmicks required like the mandatory multiplayer requirement for the previous GDevelop jam. This theme got us excited and we had several competing ideas. For once, we tried to deliver a simple but polished experience rather than a complex but half-baked one. We had several prototypes, but ended up with a button-mashing arm wrestling game. Due to the game's simplicity, there's not a whole lot to talk about regarding the gameplay loop. There's a bar at the top that shows your progress. If you're winning, it turns green and your job is to nudge it all the way to the right. Inversely, if the opponent is winning, it turns red and slowly inches to the left. To make the game visually more appealing, both the player and opponents have detailed arm animations consisting of 15 frames. 1 neutral position for when the progress bar is in the middle, 7 winning and 7 losing poses. This was the most challenging part of the entire jam, to try and draw each angle of the arms and not have them look like complete shit. To make sure this game isn't just a how fast you can mash a button game, we added more gameplay mechanics. Both players have a stamina meter that depletes over time. If it depletes fully, the character becomes fatigued and cannot push until they recover. You can also enter a defensive stance by holding down the spacebar in order to have the opponents push and double your stamina regeneration, but you're unable to push in this state. Another thing we added to prevent this from being a 2-minute game is strength. Both you and your opponent have a strength stat. The contestant with more strength will usually win since it directly influences how quickly you can move the progress bar. To get more strength, you go to the gym, and you guessed it, it's more button mashing. There are 8 opponents and most of them have a unique ability. The first one is Twiggy. His ability is Panic. If the progress bar reaches around 80%, he will permanently enter fatigue and not be able to push back. This prevents the player from losing the first fight and hopefully encourages the player to keep playing. The second one is Normie, and he does not have any abilities. The third one is Athlete. His ability is called Last Breath. When he loses all of his stamina for the first time, he instantly refills it and avoids getting fatigued. The fourth one is Homeless. When you're around 70% to victory, he throws a banana in your face. This reverses your controls and reminds everybody that there's a defend key. The fifth one is Trucker, which is an Easter egg from the film Over the Top. His ability is Power Surge, that either halves your progress or doubles his, depending on who's winning. The sixth one is Unnatural. His ability is called Roid Rage, that doubles his strength and activates just when you're about to win. The seventh one is Cyclops. He has a unique hand and arm sprite, which made development a lot harder. His ability is Blink, which drains your stamina. Also, the entire screen shakes when he does it. I don't know, it was funny at the time. The 8th and last one is God. Every couple of seconds, he will perform an ability from a random character. If you beat him, you go to hell. Sore loser. We submitted the game 38 minutes and 9 seconds before the deadline. We were one of 378 entries. We placed first in the community rankings and second in judges' pick. People seemed to really enjoy the approachable gameplay, the short and sweet duration, and the humor. The treadmill joke especially stood out. Perhaps simplicity was the key after all. Hopefully we'll be able to replicate this success in the future.
So far, we've made ample use of assets from kenney.nl, be it for tracing over kitbash models to aid in the development of 2D graphics or creating entire prototypes using stock assets. So this next jam was right up our alley. We took part in Kenny Jam 2025, which is a weekend jam spanning from the 18th until the 20th of July. The theme for this one was Power, and since it's a jam co-hosted by Kenny and K-Kit, two popular outlets for low-poly game-ready assets, there's one more major limitation. We were limited to only using their assets for all of the graphics and UI. We had more freedom when it came to music and sound, since they don't offer too many audio packs. Asset Forge was oddly prohibited though. You know, since the theme was Power again, I did briefly consider just polishing up the prototype I made for Over the Top, since it was literally already made using Kenny characters, albeit from Asset Forge. But since that would have been a massive cop-out, we made an original game instead. For this jam, we were once again back to our preferred roles, and the engine of choice was Godot 4. Being a weekend jam meant that we don't have a lot of time to lose. But sometimes the hardest part is just coming up with the game idea itself. From the beginning, I knew I wanted to do two things. One, I wanted the game setting to be in a hazy, run-down town with a nuclear power plant. And two, I wanted the game to focus on resource collection somehow. I think we did much better on the first goal. I spent the first evening composing this scene, which would serve as our intro and main menu, and I was quite pleased with it. The rest of the game, not so much. The earliest prototype from the main gameplay portion looked something like this. A flatbed truck moving back and forth between a resource and the drop-off point. But I ended up changing my mind back and forth a few times, resulting in a lot of time lost. Long story short, this is what we ended up with. The final product, called Nuclear Summer, is a point-and-click game where you pick up and offload resources based on prompts given to you in-game. It's centered around the aforementioned power plant. It's your job to offload fuel, personnel, nuclear waste, and more. Most assets were used as is from the asset packs. Some of them were kit bashed together, such as these electrical pylons, gates, dumping site, and more. All the speech bubbles were cobbled together from various UI primitives and character portraits as well. The movement is handled via navigation mesh. It was my first time using it, so at least I learned something new. Due to the art portion of the jam being solved, we had more time to compose a soundtrack. We managed to create two separate tracks, one for the intro and one for the main game. We submitted our entry 19 minutes and 25 seconds before the deadline. This jam, unfortunately, wasn't rated, so there wasn't a lot of community engagement on each other's submissions. Instead, winners were handpicked by Kenny and Kay. Nonetheless, we had fun checking out other teams' submissions and leaving feedback.
Once again, no introduction necessary for the next one. We took part in GDevelop's 8th Big Game Jam, spanning from the 7th until the 16th of November 2025. The theme this time was Take Control. Since this jam took place just after Halloween, our idea was to play as a ghost and go around possessing, aka taking control of people. And since we came to this conclusion on day 3 of the jam, we decided to make a Brotato clone, even if we suspected that won't be a good idea. You go around possessing mobs, and then you can either use their attacks to eliminate other mobs for a single soul, or sacrifice the control mob at the altar for 10. The mob designs are completely original without using any other game character's inspiration because we are very creative. Not every character can attack, and some are not possessable. Here's a list of all the characters. Average Joe has no attack, basically exists so that the arena doesn't get flooded with projectiles. Peasants have a short-range pitchfork attack. Hunters have the longest range and slowest attack speed. Knights have no attack and the highest movement speed. Warlocks have a slow attack speed, but have an area of effect attack if it doesn't hit anything. Priests, a holy character that can destroy the ghost. This is something that all holy mobs share. If the ghost is destroyed, you respawn at the altar after a few seconds. Bears, elite characters have 2 hit points and can be possessed if it takes 1 damage. They have the highest attack speed and the shortest range. Ogres, also elite mobs, and have a long range axe throw. Paladins are the only elite and holy characters in the game. They don't spawn as often, but they're very dangerous. And finally, the Grand Inquisitor, the boss of the game. Once you have 800 souls, he will spawn and cannot be destroyed. He has 3 orbs spinning around him and has a medium attack range. Every mob will walk around and only attack possessed creatures, not the ghost. Which is not the case for all holy mobs that will always chase the player. The game balancing is something that could have been better by making some mobs worth more when sacrificed or just by being eliminated. But to keep things more interesting and rewarding, when you start the game, only average Joes and peasants spawn. The more souls you collect, more advanced characters start spawning. Once you reach 1,000 souls, you win the game. We planned for a massive monster to spawn at the altar that you can possess and destroy the Grand Inquisitor, but it was cut out due to time constraints. And so far, this game had the best tutorial, where it forced you to learn the sacrifice mechanics before you start the game. As mentioned before, we compose and record all the sound effects for our games, and that was always done a few hours before the deadline, so it lacks quality. But this time we took asset sounds we own and just slapped a ton of reverb on them. And for the music, by this time I was obsessed with Megadeth. All that shredding helped me stay locked in. So if you're also a fan, you may or may not notice that the bass line has a slight resemblance to Peace Cells and Symphony of Destruction. I mean, I just copied the notes and made it faster, I didn't use the actual bass track. We submitted the game 3 hours and 14 minutes before the deadline. We actually finished earlier for once because of prior engagements. There were a total of 341 submissions, slightly less than in the previous Big Jam. Our game, With You in Spirit, placed 38th overall, putting us roughly in the top 10% of submissions. And we also got an honorable mention in the results reveal video. It was nice to get a bit of recognition, despite this being one of our lowest rated GDevelop titles.
The final entry for 2025 on our list is Stage Scene Jam, once again organized by the GDevelop team. It spanned from the 10th until the 14th of December. This one was organized last minute and literally started the same day it was announced. And it tied into the release of their brand new 3D scene editor. As such, there was no theme this time, just a simple requirement of composing a single 3D scene with something moving in it. Since the jam was taking place around the winter holidays, I wanted to create a cozy walking simulator in a snowy nighttime environment. I used several models from K-Kit's holiday bits, as well as the reindeer and sled from Kenny's holiday kit. I spent the next few days creating this layout and adding some basic lighting and animations. The new 3D editor was decent for its initial release. I did encounter a few issues though. The editor started to lag after adding too many objects to the scene. For example, the gingerbread walls used to be composed of smaller blocks in their original size. To speed up the scene, I had to delete them all and replace them with significantly fewer scaled up blocks. Sometimes, duplicating an object would cause it to move far into the distance. One issue that I saw others complain about as well had to do with importing 3D meshes. When trying to place a newly imported mesh into the world, it would instead place this GDevelop placeholder block in the far corner of the screen. The solution was to simply open and reapply the asset settings without any changes. The 3D editor will, of course, have some growing pains as a brand new feature, all of which I expect will improve in the future. At this point, I personally haven't used GDevelop in about 2 years, ever since we worked on that archery game. So I tried to keep the logic minimal. Apart from the point-to-point camera movement, this demo featured a few set pieces. Immediately upon leaving the cottage, there's a sledding reindeer moving your way. At the halfway point of the hill, if you stare into the distance, you'll see this sleigh being dragged by flying reindeer. Finally, at the end you'll see these toy train wagons rotating around the Christmas tree. Fun fact here, I couldn't figure out how to rotate an object around a custom axis, nor move it along a curve, despite there being an extension for just that. Instead, I cheated by moving the mesh off center in Blender and re-exporting the models, giving the illusion that the train is rotating around a certain point. For background music, I reused the track we created for this trailer several years ago. As this was a more casual jam, I didn't put any effort into the thumbnail, I just captured and used the screenshot. The project was submitted 34 minutes and 56 seconds before the deadline. It was just one of 25 entries, some of which were pretty impressive. This jam didn't have any community ratings, instead 3 winners were handpicked by the judges. Overall, this jam was an interesting little distraction, and it was fun to explore and beta test the brand new 3D editor. I'm looking forward to seeing how it improves in the future. For our final entry in this list, we simultaneously took part in not 1, but 2 jams. GDevelop's 9th Big Game Jam, and GameDev TV's annual Game Jam for 2026. They both started on the 15th of May, with the GDevelop one ending on the 24th, and GameDev TV ending a day later on the 25th of May. And the themes were, To the Top for GDevelop, and Connections for GameDev TV. I immediately had 2 ideas, the first of which was a platformer using a grappling mechanic to traverse obstacles as seen in this crude prototype. However, we didn't commit to this idea as it was very similar to last year's GameDev TV Jam winner. The other idea was essentially a World of Goo clone. It felt like the perfect fit, connecting nodes in order to reach higher destinations. This clearly fits both themes well. The only question was, how hard would it be to implement in GDevelop? The physics extension lets you set up joints between two objects. There are several joint types to choose from. Using this official sample, we were able to deduce that the revolute joint will be the best one for our scenario. After setting up the joints and some initial physics properties, I ended up with this prototype. It worked so well that I felt confident committing to a World of Goo style game. In case you're not familiar with World of Goo, the game is essentially about building a bridge from point A to point B. You build said bridge by placing new nodes next to existing ones. Notice the little people by the base camp? The goal is to get them to the next camp by linking them together. The challenge comes from making sure your bridge doesn't tip over and using as few moves as possible for the best score. Usually, I work on graphics for GDevelop jams, but this time I stuck to coding. I still created a lot of crude concept art and A-Sprite to help me prototype. The game has you guiding a group of mountaineers who are trying to reach the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. As the core mechanics were essentially in place, we had plenty of time to come up with interesting levels to traverse. The final submission had 8 levels, ranging from a simple tutorial to deadly environments. You're initially presented with a level selection screen, showing your progress. The background art also tries to follow where you would be on your journey. You start off firmly planted on the ground with the mountain in the distance. To make things more interesting, I also added a balloon and anchor node. Balloons were supposed to help you build bridges across wide gaps and hazards, but the physics have a tendency to go haywire. In the end, I feel like the balloons did more harm than good, as was also confirmed by several comments we received from others. The anchor was meant to weigh down your construction to prevent it from tipping over. This would have especially been useful in the final level, which also had a wind mechanic. We submitted the game 39 minutes and 1 second before the deadline to GDevelop's 9th Big Game Jam. Although Game Dev TV's jam lasted a day longer, we chose not to utilize this extra time and just submitted the same iteration of Kilimanjaro. I'm not sure if you want to count this or not, but this technically makes it the entry with the most time remaining, a whopping 1 day and 2 hours before the deadline. Game Dev TV's results came out first after 8 days of community voting. It was purely community rated with no judge involvement. Makes sense as there were no prizes. We came in 57th place out of 833 entries, which puts us in the top 7%. Not bad. GDevelop went through the usual process of 1 week of community voting, then 3 days of judges voting, with the results coming out a few days later. We did surprisingly well in this jam, coming in 20th place overall out of 400 entries, placing us in the top 5% of community rated games. We also earned 2nd place in judges pick, as well as being picked by the guest judges as one of their top 2 entries. Overall, very happy with the outcome of this jam.
So those were the 8 jams we participated in the last year and a half. It was a great experience, very educational, and we're still looking forward to entering more jams. Now that we finally finished this video, we can get back on track and start uploading more often. Or not, I won't promise anything.